So I have done a video on this before. I made a whole list of ways that leftists have just brought their evangelicalism into leftism. And this is going to be a series now, because oh boy, have I added a lot more. I was actually having coffee with a friend of mine who's Gen Z, like older Gen Z, just graduated college, a fellow trans person. And they grew up super, super religious fundamentalist. And they were like, I left the church, and now I'm a leftist, and I'm still surrounded by controlling, judgmental people who don't have sex. And yeah, so let's go ahead and start this list. So first on the list is proselytizing. A lot of y'all are still trying to spread your belief system and get people on your side the same way you did when you were in church. And the only way you were ever taught to proselytize was to yell and be very, very annoying. And if someone doesn't agree with you right away, then they get banished. And I am here to tell you, the reason your church leaders had you proselytize like that was not because it worked. That kind of stuff doesn't actually bring people to church. And I know this because I'm a minister, and never once have I ever encouraged anyone to proselytize. In fact, I've told them to do the opposite. My church has grown because we do good stuff and people see that, and then they want to be a part of it. And that is how belief systems spread. That is how ideas spread. They spread through acts of love and kindness. Your minister had you do that, not because it works. It's because that's how he could maintain control over you. By convincing you that the rest of the world was mean and bad and scary. That all outside forces will lead you to hell. That minister isn't there anymore. You are enforcing that all on your own. Proselytizing in that way literally only serves those in power. Next time you're yelling your beliefs at someone, ask yourself who it actually serves. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, the series where I talk about ways that leftists have carried their evangelical upbringing into leftist spaces without deconstructing it. This is part 2, but you don't have to watch them in order. So next we're going to talk about moral purity and judgment. Because when you grow up in evangelicalism, there is a strict set of rules that you must adhere to, lest you face abuse or banishment. There's these moral standards, right? And if you do something wrong, there's this system that you have to go through. And it is an abusive system that leads you to being redeemed or cleansed of your sins. And then you get to return to the collective. Or sometimes you just get kicked out of the collective altogether. Usually this system involves a certain level of groveling, denunciation of the action, and then some sort of like cleansing ritual to bring you back in if the church decides that they want to bring you back in. The thing is, this doesn't actually encourage atonement. It encourages a fear response. You say what you're supposed to say, you do what you're supposed to do, but a lot of the time you don't even know why what you were doing was considered wrong. It was just against the rules. And if it's against the rules, it's sinful. It's going to lead you to hell. And you have brought this system of accountability with you. It is a demand for immediate apology, immediate groveling, immediate denunciation, immediate atonement. And then at the end of it, a lot of the time, we don't even offer the redemption. A lot of the left operates purely in excommunication, which is not great for our cause. And just like in the church, it is often the most egregious offenses that go unpunished, and minor mistakes or moral failures that receive the harshest criticism. This mentality allows leftists to see the rest of the world as too far gone, unable to be helped, unable to change their mind, because they're bad and sinful and scary. So the left never actually fights those in power. It just picks at the very human mistakes of its own members in order to maintain its own moral purity. And nobody actually learns anything, because you can't learn under those conditions. You can't actually grow as a person under those conditions. You just get anxious. You get afraid that you're going to accidentally break the rules again. Leftists live in a digital panopticon. It's Sartre's no exit. We live in fear of the judgment of one another, and that does not inspire collectivism. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I break down the ways that leftists have brought their evangelical upbringing with them into leftist spaces. This is part 3 of that series. You do not have to watch them in order. And next, we're going to talk about the notion that all sin is equal. And no one actually believes this. Evangelicals only say this so they can come down harder on the offenses that they see as a danger to a hierarchy. And what it actually leads to is not all sin being treated equally. It leads to an inversion, where actual crimes go unpunished and minor moral failings are punished more harshly. And part of it is because it allows fundamentalist leaders to keep control of their congregation. The other part of it is that minor moral failings are just easier to deal with. People who feel genuine remorse for doing bad things, who are anxious about doing the wrong thing, are far easier to punish than people who could care less. And the way this is often accomplished is by comparing this minor moral failure to a crime. For example, a lot of us grew up in churches where homosexuality was compared to bestiality and pedophilia. And I've seen a lot of the left do this as well, where something like misgendering or an uneducated take on something is compared to a hate crime. And I think in our heads we know those aren't the same thing, but we have been taught to treat them as morally equal or as a slippery slope. Do y'all remember Lindsay Ellis? When she made that hot take about, like, the Disney Dragon movie being similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and people accused her of getting Asian women killed? I think sometimes leftists do this because they want to stroke their own ego and seem like the most woke, but I also think that we do this because we are conditioned to believe that all human inadequacies are a slippery slope to degeneracy or to criminal behavior. And that is just simply not the case. Human beings are stupid and we fuck up all the time. We have to have grace for one another. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. This is a series where I break down how many leftists have brought their evangelical upbringings with them into leftist spaces. And in this video, we're going to talk about the No True Scotsman. And we've seen how Christians apply No True Scotsman. Oh, well, those aren't real Christians. Not Christians like us. We're the real Christians, the good Christians. And there is a difference between pointing out that there are fundamental differences between you and someone else in your in-group and what you believe, and using other people as an excuse for never examining the moral failings in your own in-group. So how did leftists bring this with them? Well, it's easy. Blame it on the libs. Now, saying that there are fundamental differences between liberalism and leftism is fine, because it's true. But looking at a problem that exists within both liberalism and leftism, and saying something along the lines of, oh, you say the left is doing that, that's just the libs. That's just some lib shit right there. The amount of comments I've gotten like that is unreal. You don't get to distance yourself from that. And it's always stuff like what I'm talking about right now in this series. And people are like, oh, that's not real leftists, that's the libs. No, it's not, it's you guys too, it's all of us. This is a problem, we need to take care of it. You don't just get to deny responsibility because you want to push off your own moral failings to the people who aren't real leftists. That's not how any of this works. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I talk about how leftists have brought their evangelical habits into leftist spaces. And in this video, we're going to talk about hierarchy. This is going to be a fun one, guys, so buckle up. Many people in leftist spaces still maintain a dedication to hierarchy. They've just inverted the hierarchy. I have had people in my comment section give me actual lists where they have tried to break down identities into most to least privilege. And that is not how intersectionality works, dear Lord. We all just sort of exist in this yarn ball of privileges and oppressions. Flipping the hierarchy that white Christians already put into place upside down doesn't actually do much, because it doesn't get to the root of things. It doesn't deconstruct how nonsensical these hierarchies were in the first place. And most of the people who are guilty of this are white people. So what ends up happening is that a lot of white people treat people in marginalized groups as these magical beings of pure energy, capable of doing no wrong. And in real weird examples, like I've been seeing with neurodivergent people, sometimes people go real weird with it. And they're like, neurodivergent people are the next stage in evolution. What? No. And I say this as an autistic person. We are simply people whose brains work differently. Listen to marginalized people doesn't mean that marginalized people are incapable of doing dumb shit. Do you know the amount of trans people that I would not want anyone to listen to? Like, y'all, some of us are stupid. Some of us have bad ideas. It also leads to people like holding marginalized people to a really, really high standard because they see them as magical beings of pure light capable of doing no wrong. So then when they do, we get into this weird black and white thinking where if a marginalized person makes a mistake, they are thrown into the pit. Marginalized people aren't treated as people by the left. Human beings who are silly and awkward and weird and capable of making mistakes, and that is in and of itself dehumanizing. Marginalized people still aren't actually being listened to. We're being paraded around as oracles who are expected to have all the answers to everybody else's problems. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I talk about how leftists have brought their evangelical upbringing into leftist spaces. And in this video, we're going to talk about fear of the other. Because when you're raised in evangelicalism, you are taught that your church, your denomination, has the right answers, and that everyone outside of that is bad and wrong and sinful, and that they are frightening. You are taught that anyone outside of your in-group, outside of your church or denomination, is a denizen of the world, and that should you interact with them, they could corrupt or taint you in some way and make you unworthy of heaven. And notice I say outside of your church or denomination, because Christians even think this about other Christians. This worldview is incredibly narrow, and if you step outside of it even the smallest amount, you are cast into the world. You are excommunicated, or you are expected to go through this ritual of denunciation, because you have been corrupted, you have been tainted. And in really high control groups, if you even hang out with someone who has experienced excommunication, or if you hang out with someone who is outside of this bubble, then you have the potentiality of being corrupted and being excommunicated by proxy. And leftists still do this. Y'all are still out here doing this. You have a very narrow and limited definition of what it means to be a leftist, and even the slightest difference of opinion makes someone the epitome of evil. And y'all don't use the word Satan. Y'all don't use the word demonic, but you've kept that mentality. Instead, someone's a federal agent, someone's a turncoat, a traitor, someone must want all queer people dead, and what y'all are actually saying is, oh, they're demons. In your mind, those people become the worst people you can imagine, because they've been corrupted by having this difference in opinion, even if they agree with you on everything else. And over time, the people you're willing to be around, that group gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And the world starts to feel scarier and scarier and scarier and scarier. And you feel more and more alone. And that fear, that isolation, that only serves the people in power. Because we're stronger when we're together, and they know it. Welcome to Leftist Deconstruction, a video series where I break down how leftists have brought their fundamentalist upbringing into leftist spaces. And I am going to start using the word fundamentalist instead of evangelical, because someone pointed out that fundamentalism is really the root of things, not the evangelicalism itself. Dolly Parton is an evangelical. And I do find that to be the more accurate wording, so I will be using that moving forward. I try to be precise, but sometimes I do fuck it up. Speaking of fucking it up, we're going to be talking about punitive justice and how we respond to people when they fuck up. Have you ever noticed that a lot of Christian fundamentalists tend to have very stark, gory, horrifying, extremely detailed depictions of hell? Not so much for heaven. That is because their sense of justice is inherently punitive and fear-based. It is less about rewarding the good or supporting those wronged than it is about punishing the bad people. It is more about scaring people out of doing the bad thing than it is about rewarding those who do the good thing. And what that leads to is not a lot of people wanting to do the good thing, and instead just having perpetual anxiety about not doing the bad thing. Because our society is so heavily influenced by fundamentalism and this punitive sense of justice, we see this play out all around us. We talked about call-out creators yesterday, and how they play on this desire for punitive justice and build their platforms off our worst instincts. And the reason that this is so easy to exploit is because doing the good thing is hard, and it doesn't give us the immediate dopamine blast that watching someone get punished does. This is why I fucking hate the Book of Revelation. I think it's heretical. And getting out of this is really about switching our own mentality. And that takes a lifetime of spiritual work, because we all like to see the bad people punished. But it is a very, very momentary reward. Building good things, doing good things, is far more rewarding in the long run. So the only way out of this one is to deprogram ourselves from instant gratification. That sucks. No one wants to do that because it sucks. We want the dopamine reward now. But in doing that, we lose sight of what it takes to actually build a better world. We start to think that not being the bad person is good enough, and it doesn't incentivize us to support the people who've actually been hurt. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I break down how many leftists have brought their fundamentalist upbringing into leftist spaces. And in this part of the series, we are going to talk about magic words. And I blame Sola Fide for this. Sola Fide fucked us so hard. And Sola Fide is the concept that you achieve salvation through faith alone. That it's not about what you do, it's about what you believe. And it works a little bit like trickle-down economics. Well, surely if you believe the right things, you'll do the right things, right? No, that's not how it works in practice at all. And leftists have created their own version of Sola Fide. Their own version of being saved by faith alone. By believing the right things. And loudly proclaiming that they believe the right things. Because now there's a bunch of leftists who think they don't have to do shit except for put BLM in their profile. If you aren't doing any activism, the watermelon in your username is just the leftist equivalent of thoughts and prayers. Faith without works is dead. Blogging yourself and saying you believe the right thing doesn't do shit. You have to actually collectivize. You have to actually get people to believe in your cause. And just like proselytizing leads to shallow faith, yelling at people until they are too afraid to disagree with you doesn't lead to you recruiting people who are actually going to back you up. The only people you will ever recruit to your cause through that method are people who are afraid of you being mad at them. They aren't going to actually care, they just care whether or not you're mad. You have to do the works. The works are necessary. What this has also led to is people bullying each other for not saying the right words. Even if the person saying the right words is far more likely to actually back up your cause. Leftism has been gatekept through a series of academic terms, or magic words, and that doesn't make people want to join your cause, and it doesn't get anything done. But this is the last video I'm going to make in this series today. If you like what I do here, this is my job, and all the ways to leave a tip are over here. I really hope you guys are enjoying this series. Thank you guys so much for everything you do. I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless. Welcome to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I break down how leftists have brought their fundamentalist upbringings into leftist spaces. We're just going to start off the morning right, because we're going to talk about coitus, intimacy, shagging, hole and hole and button mouth stuff, okay? Because I have noticed a concerning amount of leftists who seem to have sexual anxiety. And every time I'm just like, my generation did not fight this hard for your right to eat ass so that you could act like this. Now, this is not to say that there aren't people who are asexual and simply have no interest in it and are sex repulsed because of that. But even to those people, I must say, that feeling ends with you. That is your personal choice for your personal life. And if you try to force that on other people, you have simply become the Apostle Paul. However, I do have to say, the amount of asexual people who are trying to force that on other people is minimal. I've seen it a couple times. It's not super prevalent. I'm just trying to cover all my bases, okay? The general anxiety that I've seen around sex is that people are having sex or sexual fantasies in an immoral way. And the cause, more often than not, of this sexual anxiety is because sex education in this country is atrocious. A lot of you have not learned the proper parameters for consent or what makes an exploitative sexual relationship, and so you are terrified of violating that. For those of us who did grow up in the church, our sexual education was at best negligent. And the way a lot of people have responded to that, because they don't feel like they can ask these questions without judgment, is that they've just become sexual Puritans. Do you know what you guys sound like when you are wagging the finger at people's erotica? When you are talking about immoral ships? You sound like Nancy at the PTA meeting, being like, I'm a Christian God-honoring woman, and I don't want my children seeing this filth. So here's the general rule of thumb, right? If you are both adults, and you are both into it, that is your private romantic business. And just because someone has a fantasy about something doesn't mean they want that fantasy enacted in real life. If, for example, a woman has a fantasy about being kidnapped by a pirate king who seduces her and makes her his pirate queen, that doesn't mean she actually wants to be kidnapped, or that men should be kidnapping. What people do in their brains and in their bedrooms is not your business. As long as it's safe and you're both grown-ups and you're both into it, it's fine. It's fine. You're going to be okay. And you can think someone's fantasy is weird. There are plenty of people's fantasies that I think are weird. And you don't have to come up with moral justification for that. You just have to realize it's not your business. If a ship or an erotica or a fantasy makes you uncomfortable, it's fine for it to make you uncomfortable. But the fantasies of other grown-ups are not your business. Sexual puritanism doesn't help anybody, and people feeling unsafe to ask questions about sexuality means you will have more breaches of consent because you've created a taboo around talking about it. Now, if after this series is done, you do have questions, you can ask those questions. Just leave them in the comments. Being educated on these things is how we do them more safely. That's just the long and short of it. Be safe, have fun, don't be stupid. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series of videos where I break down ways that many leftists have not deconstructed their fundamentalist upbringing. And before we continue on in this series, I've had some comments that are like, I've seen leftists fall into this and they were not raised fundamentalists. I've also gotten comments that are like, isn't this just like white supremacy? Isn't this like internalized capitalism? And the answer is yes. Yes, of course it is. Fundamentalism and white supremacy and capitalism often work in tandem with each other. It's kind of hard to see where one ends and another begins. There's no clear-cut line there. Decolonization work and religious deconstruction and chipping away at your internalized capitalism all often look the same way. The reason I'm putting things in this particular framework isn't to say that people who put it in through another framework are wrong. This just happens to be an area I know a lot about, and it is an area where a lot of people who have left the church can very clearly see a type of person they don't want to be, which is the fundamentalists they grew up with, and it provides a mirror that is really meaningful to a lot of people. There is a lot of religious deconstruction that goes hand in hand with decolonization. It goes hand in hand with getting rid of your internalized capitalism. Even people who did not grow up in fundamentalism still live in a country that has been shaped by it. Just like we are shaped by living under capitalism and white supremacy. What I'm hoping to do is provide a helpful guide that helps people deconstruct this worldview further. And at the end of this, what I want to do is try to provide some tips on how to fix it from someone who's still not done fixing it within themselves. This is going to be a lifelong process. It's not going to happen overnight. And that is yet another reason why we need to have grace with each other through this process. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I break down the ways that many leftists still need to deconstruct their fundamentalist upbringing. And in this video, we're going to talk about low self-esteem and powerlessness, as well as the concept of original sin. If you grew up fundamentalist, you probably grew up believing that human beings are inherently sinful, that we are inherently dirty, and the only way to be forgiven of that sin is to be a true Christian, whatever the hell that means. And every denomination has their own view of what makes you a true Christian. And most of them make exceptions for certain people or certain sins. So everything is really, really inconsistent. A lot of us grew up not knowing whether or not we were doing the bad thing, so we just learned to feel guilty for everything, and we started feeling powerless when there wasn't someone there to tell us what to do. So what you ended up with is a bunch of people who feel dirty and obscene and naturally disgusting, and that is the default. And if you do sins, then you're seen as even more obscene and disgusting. And that doesn't lead to good self-esteem. And I think that this concept of sin as like dirtiness or filth that you are inherently dirty and filthy and need to be cleansed, I think that's a really unhelpful framework for looking at sin. Other religions and cultures also have concepts of sin that aren't nearly as damaging. It's seen more as like a stumbling off the path, or as something that was taken from you that needs to be gotten back. It's not you're dirty and need to be scrubbed clean, and there's only one way to do that. It's you did a fuck up. A very human fuck up. And that's okay. Let's just get you back to where you need to be. Let's take something like silly as an example, right? You drink way too much one night. You have made a bad life choice. You have done a sin. But telling you you're dirty and that you need to be scrubbed clean isn't super helpful. What you need is water and Gatorade and ibuprofen so you can get back where you need to be. Let me tell you, I've definitely had hangovers that I have begged the Lord's forgiveness for after. Are you a sinner? Yes. We all are. It's okay. You're human. You just have to take responsibility, face the consequences of your actions, and do what needs to be done to come back. Fundamentalism doesn't offer this kind of grace, which is crazy because that should be the bedrock of Christianity, is grace and mercy and the ability to come back to the path when you've made a mistake. That is what the religion's supposed to be. I remember when I was growing up, they used to compare girls who'd lost their virginity to a chewed up piece of bubblegum. You cannot have self-esteem if you think of yourself as a chewed piece of bubblegum, because once a piece of bubblegum is chewed, it can't be unchewed bubblegum again. There is no hope for coming back to the path. And part of this work is going to be learning to like yourself, learning to be confident in your choices, learning to realize you have more power than you think you do. You are not helpless. You are not unworthy of grace. Because as long as you stay this insecure, you are going to project those insecurities onto other people. And instead of taking responsibility for your flaws and your mistakes, you're going to try to moralize them. You're going to try to justify them because you see any mistake you make not as just a falling away from a path you can walk back onto, but as a dirtiness you cannot scrub off you. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I break down the ways that many leftists have not deconstructed their fundamentalist upbringing. And in this video, we're going to talk about the savior complex. And this savior complex is a little more complex than I think a lot of people think about. Because a lot of leftists want to save individual people or groups, but they are simultaneously waiting for a savior to fix systemic issues as a whole. That is why you'll see a lot of leftists go, you are bad and evil and wrong, but when it comes to big systemic issues, you don't actually see us collectivizing that much. It's incredibly individualistic. It's the sin of that person, and you will certainly wag the finger at that person. And we talk about systemic change, but it very much seems like we're waiting around for someone else to do that. I've said on this channel before, if y'all want socialism, you have to be social. Wagging the finger at individuals does very, very little in the long run. It's kind of like climate change, right? We're told that we need to do this and that and the other to, prevent climate change, but on an individual level, it doesn't do much. Because the problem is these big corporations. Fundamentalism focuses a lot on the individual's sin. For example, they focus a lot on, say, a woman having an abortion, which they believe is a sin. But they don't focus a whole lot on things like war. Because Jesus is going to come back. Jesus is going to solve war. And y'all are waiting for a savior, someone who's going to step up and be the person who rights all the world's wrongs systemically, while you try to wag the finger at people until they become leftists. And that's not how any of this works. We save us. We save us by building strong communities, and by looking out for one another, and by having grace for one another. You, personally, cannot save the world, but we can. Jesus has not returned. We are Christ's hands on earth. This can also lead to like a rapture mentality. A lot of leftists see the revolution the same way fundamentalists see the rapture. It's this period of tribulation where, one person stands up and the army of his followers take over, and afterwards there's utopia. all of the bad people are cast into the flames, and all of the good people get to continue the world. And so we all just need to sit around and do absolutely goddamn nothing, but point the finger at each other for our individual failings until Revolution Daddy rises up and brings us into utopia. And that's just not how this is gonna be. Moving the world forward is a slog, and it's boring, and it's not always fun. It is, however, very rewarding. Being in community with others is very rewarding. Mutual aid is very rewarding. But just like many evangelicals are rushing headfirst into the apocalypse and trying to make it happen faster so that they can get to utopia or heaven faster, there is an undercurrent in leftism of accelerationism. Unfortunately, change in the world is something that's going to require a great deal of patience, a great deal of work, and you probably won't see it all. You definitely won't see it all. No one is coming to save us. We save us. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. This is a series where I break down the ways that many leftists have not deconstructed their fundamentalism. And in this video, we're going to talk about the one true path to salvation and the aversion to questioning that goes hand in hand with that. Because a lot of y'all don't want to admit it, but a lot of y'all do not like people asking you questions. You want to be able to just point to a scientific study or say something that you believe to be true, and for people to just accept that whole cloth. And if someone does not accept that right away, you will moralize and justify bullying them about it. And I get it. It is fucking exhausting having to explain this shit to people over and over and over again, especially if you're a marginalized person. And there are bad faith actors who will use their questions as a way to waste your time. But education is foundational to activism. Period. Full stop. Now, if you are exhausted and you don't have it in you to answer somebody's questions, you can just be like, I'm not in the mood for this today. Here's an article you can read, but I'm not here to debate. I'm just trying to vibe. However, if you consider yourself an activist and you want to engage in activism, the words, "It's not my job to educate you," or "pay me for this education," should never leave your fucking mouth. Because here's the thing. If you don't educate people, someone else will. Someone on the right will, happily. Someone on the right will gladly give people all the wrong answers as to why their lives suck. And like I said, that doesn't mean that you're like a 24-hour chatbot there to answer the questions of every person who comes into contact with you. But activism does involve answering people's questions, and you have to do that in a way that you're not being a dick. Unfortunately, for a lot of y'all, being a dick was the only way you learned how to spread information. You learned to memorize Bible verses so you could yell them at people. And now y'all have just learned quotes from Marx so you can yell them at people. And some of y'all, not all of y'all, but some of y'all don't know what the hell you're talking about. You don't know how to apply what you have learned in reality. You have learned to memorize and regurgitate without ever thinking critically about anything. You've never learned to ask questions, and you get mad at other people for doing it. A lot of y'all also only think there's one way to make the world better, but everybody has a place in this. You know what? I take back what I said earlier. Some of y'all can say it's not my job to educate you. But if you're going to say that, you need to have someone in your group whose job it is. You need to say, it's not my job to educate you. That's Jeff's job. And then you pass them to Jeff. We need a diversity of tactics, diversity of perspectives and worldviews. Demanding that everybody think exactly like you do means that you are going to be missing out on crucial information that other people can provide. Crucial worldviews and perspectives. An example I was actually thinking about in the shower earlier is when you hear conservatives be like, I pay so much in taxes, I don't want my taxes going to people on welfare. And the way a lot of leftists will respond to that is to get angry and to wag the finger and to act holier than thou. But what is that man actually saying? Yeah, he might just be a selfish dick. But what he's probably feeling is, my God, I work 12 hours a day, I breathe in drywall, I just paid $1,000 on taxes, tags, and inspections on my truck. I don't want to pay for somebody else's kids to eat, I can barely pay for my own kids to eat. And that is an understandable worldview. That is a worldview that deserves sympathy. That man does deserve more for the work he's doing. That man does deserve to be able to feed his kids. And that's what he's actually worried about. But because leftists are so dogmatic, we start to miss out on why people do the things they do and say the things they say and believe the things they believe. So instead of saying, you're a selfish piece of shit and you need to believe what I believe in, what really needs to be said is, man, I agree with you. You deserve better pay. You deserve to be able to feed your kids. It's very hard to be compassionate and to be charitable when you're in your position. Let's try to figure out ways we can fix it and make sure everyone gets what they need. Dogma is not helping us. There is no one true path to salvation. It's going to take a coalition of all of us, of all of our perspectives, worldviews, and abilities. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series of videos where I talk about how many leftists have not deconstructed their fundamentalist worldview. And in this video, we're going to talk about risk aversion. So in previous videos, we've talked about how this mentality that we are sinful affects our self-esteem, that we often see ourselves as dirty or unworthy of grace or unworthy of redemption. And what that does is it just makes us afraid of sinning. We are afraid to make mistakes, to be imperfect, and we are afraid that someone else might see that they may see that and judge us for it. And that leads us to simply never taking any risks. Because risk means you could make a mistake, you could do it wrong. Someone could see you, someone could judge you. And this is a harsh word, but I'm gonna use it. It leads to cowardice, and it leads to paralysis. And then we have to morally justify that cowardice and paralysis. But here's the thing. Making mistakes and fucking it all up, that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we get better. If we are too afraid to make mistakes, we never improve ourselves in any way. And if we cannot improve ourselves in any way, we cannot improve the world. Now, all of us are going to have limitations. Things we can and can't do, things we're going to be better at than other people and worse at than other people. You don't have to be good at everything, but you don't get to deny responsibility for caring for the world either. And here's the thing. When you start taking responsibility for caring for the world, it is other people's responsibility to care for you too. We need to provide reasonable accommodations for people so that they can be a part of what we are making together. We talked about powerlessness in another video too. A lot of people feel very powerless, they feel like they just can't. And here's the thing, you can't do everything, but all of us can do something. Mutual aid is mutual. Accommodations are made so that everyone can participate, but you have to be willing to fuck it up. You have to be willing to fail. We talk a lot about safety, but there are going to be situations that simply aren't safe, but still have to happen. We have to learn how to weigh risks, and no one is willing to do that right now because they are too afraid of being problematic. They are too afraid of getting things wrong, of asking questions that might sound stupid and being yelled at for it. We have not created an environment that is conducive to learning because no one feels like they can ask any questions and no one feels like they can take any risks. And we have done this to ourselves. Yes, there is more of a police state now. Yes, there's less third spaces. So we have to get creative. No one said this was going to be easy. If it was easy, it'd be done already. We have to allow other people enough grace that they are allowed to fuck it up occasionally without a bunch of people breathing down their necks. Because if we don't take risks, we're going to stay frozen. And being frozen just means we're a bunch of cowards. Bunch of cowards who are too afraid of each other, not even the people in power, too afraid of each other to get anything done. But this is the last video I'm going to make in this series for today. I'm going to pick things back up tomorrow. We're going to do a few more videos like this, but then we're going to start talking about ways we can fix this. And please know, through all these videos, I am not here to attack you personally. That's part of what I just mentioned in this video. There are a lot of people who are perceiving these broad criticisms of the left as personal attacks on them. And a lot of that comes from guilt. A lot of that comes from shame. And we don't know how to handle that guilt and shame, so we just project it onto other people and try to moralize our faults so that we can feel like we are morally correct. And it leads to people not ever taking accountability. Because you can't take accountability if you never admit you did anything wrong. And people are too afraid to admit they did anything wrong to ever learn and grow. Like I said, I'm going to be picking up this series tomorrow. If you like this series, if you like what I've been doing, this is my full-time job, and there are ways to donate over here. Thank you guys so much for everything you do. I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I talk about the ways that leftists may not have deconstructed their fundamentalist upbringing. And this is a video that I'm going to call Secret Devils. When you are raised in fundamentalism, you are taught that the devil is sneaky, that there are 1,000 ways to fall into sin, and that the world is out to get you, that you are being persecuted, and that you should be fearful of every other person who is not in your in-group, because those people are going to lead you to hell. And a lot of us are still on the lookout for secret devils. If someone disagrees with us, it's not because they have a difference of opinion. It's because they have a secret agenda. They are trying to hurt you. And that is just not the case. Most people are not trying to hurt you. Most people are just trying to get through their fucking day. There's not a whole lot of conspiracies. Most of the time, people who are doing truly evil shit are doing it right out in the fucking open. They're just powerful enough that they never have to face consequences for it. But this secret devil's mentality leads to paranoia and conspiracy theories. And what I've realized is the left is really no better at disseminating misinformation than the right. Human beings in general are not as interested in the truth as they are in finding information that backs up their worldview. And this can lead us to a lot of really weird places. It leads us to pieces of misinformation that make things seem more black and white, that make the people we don't like seem more like the enemy. But we are all capable of good and bad, and the only way to find the truth is to look at the whole truth. There are no secret devils. We're all just a bunch of humans capable of doing good and bad things, wonderful things and monstrous things. And part of the reason we want to other the people we find monstrous is because we like to believe that we are not capable of becoming monsters ourselves. And unfortunately, the only way we're going to be able to get over this is by trusting one another, by not jumping to the conclusion that everyone is malicious when they say something stupid. In fact, we should never assume maliciousness when stupidity is just as likely an answer, or when ignorance is just as likely an answer. The thing is, there's lots of stuff in life we're not going to get answers for. Lots of stuff in life that's not going to be black and white. And we have to learn to accept this and stop looking for conspiracies that don't exist in order to cope with unknown elements. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series on helping leftists deconstruct their fundamentalist worldview. And in this video, we're going to talk about something that has brought me a great deal of controversy, and that is how leftists interact with children. When you grow up in a fundamentalist household, you, as a child, were very likely seen as the property of your parents. You were their responsibility. Everything you did was a reflection on them, and they owned you. They made all your choices for you, and it was your job to serve them. A lot of leftists still think of children and parents this exact same way. Children are their parents' responsibility. If they act up in public, it's the parents' fault. Children are not human beings entitled to public space. They are property that the parents need to control. And while at the end of the day, it is a parent's responsibility to ensure that a child has what they need, it is also the responsibility of a community to ensure that children are provided for and well taken care of. When I talk about this, I like to use the example of the Starship Enterprise. There are children on the Enterprise, and while those children are ultimately the responsibility of their parents, the entire ship sees those children as their responsibility as well. They are part of the crew, part of the whole, part of the collective. Even Jean-Luc Picard, who repeatedly says he does not like children, and sometimes does get annoyed with them, does see those children as his responsibility because he is the captain of the Enterprise. It is also his responsibility to keep those children safe and to ensure that they have what they need. Children need people outside of their parents. They need aunts and uncles and family friends and other community members who can offer them love and kindness and a different perspective. They need places to go if they don't feel safe at home, and people they can turn to, even if they are safe at home, with things they may not want to discuss with their parents. Children aren't a burden or a nuisance. They aren't property. They are human beings, and they are all of our responsibility. A lot of y'all sound like the right-wingers you despise when you talk about children. You don't sound any different than people who say they don't want their tax dollars to go to kids' school lunches. And like I said, Jean-Luc Picard, not the greatest with kids, but still knows how to treat them with kindness and love and respect, and still sees them as valuable members of his community. And because leftists view children this way, they also don't want to make accommodations for parents. And making accommodations for parents is actually something fundamentalists do better than we do a lot of the time. Parents are often excluded from events or mutual aid projects because other leftists make them uncomfortable. They act like their children are a burden. And if we are going to get anything done, we have got to start making accommodations for children and families. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where I break down how many leftists have not left behind their fundamentalist upbringing. And this video is going to have a trigger warning for abuse, because at this point in the series, we do need to talk about how some of these things can lead to abuse both online and interpersonally. And if you find that you have engaged in some of these things, if you think you may have been using abusive tactics, I am a minister. It is literally not my job to judge you. I am not asking for you to confess. You don't have to make a big public statement. Just acknowledge this. Acknowledge that this may have been something you have done, and realize that this is your opportunity to turn it around. You aren't bad, you aren't irredeemable, you just have to take accountability and vow to do better. Sometimes leftists do use their terminology and worldview to abuse other people. And they do this in very similar ways to the way fundamentalists do. And this happens both online and in person. And we need to remember first and foremost that a great deal of the time, abuse is perpetuated by someone who wants to feel power and control. We have told germ stories on here, and now I would like to speak from personal experience on what this abuse can look like. Germ was a man who had very, very low self-esteem and a tendency towards authoritarianism. His excuse for his verbal, physical, and sexual abuse was that he was trying to make me better. He was trying to prepare me to be a revolutionary. And this is very similar to what fundamentalists do to people when they talk about the Lord's army. They are trying to create a group of people who are so emotionally broken, they will fight for this cause to the death. One of the tactics Germ used was that he did not want me consuming any media that wasn't about the issues he thought were important. Joy was considered frivolous. It was considered unimportant. So if you find someone or come across someone who is trying to control the media you consume, or encouraging you to consume media in a way that is a detriment to yourself, in a way that does not make you more productive, this can be used as a tactic of abuse. Another thing that can be misused is the term tone policing. Now, the term tone policing exists for a reason. It's because when marginalized people get angry, people will often use that anger as an excuse to shut them down so that they cannot get their point across. However, this terminology can also be used in order to excuse bullying, harassment, and abuse. And that's what makes this tricky. While being a marginalized person is frustrating, deeply, deeply frustrating, and we have the right to be angry about things, what we need to remember is that that anger needs to be focused at people in power, the people who actually control our lives. And it is not an excuse to treat our neighbors with cruelty or indignity, especially when they are trying to learn. And really, what this comes down to is treating people how you would want to be treated if you said something stupid. If I said something stupid, I would want to be corrected, but I wouldn't want to be screamed at. I wouldn't want to be told I'm an idiot. I wouldn't want to be treated like I am fundamentally broken. And I think sometimes we get so frustrated we forget that. And all of us do this to some extent. All of us get frustrated and we lash out and we say dumb shit. And we treat people in ways that are not kind. But we shouldn't make excuses for that. We should work on it. Because if we keep making excuses for it, then it becomes a pattern and we've justified it in our heads. And at a certain point, it does just become bullying. I have said on this channel before, every movement that we create has to be a movement of love. We have to love our fellow man, love our neighbor, more than we are angry at our oppressor. Our movements need to be based around support for one another, not around the fact that we are angry and pissed off and want to lash out. Because that is how we hurt one another. Because when we can't get at those people, we just turn on each other. We also need to realize when we are doing something because we just want to feel in control of a situation. And before you guys start getting defensive in my comment section, because I know some of you are about to, some of you are having that knee-jerk reaction right now, just sit with this and think about it. Think about what you're doing. Think about whether or not it's actually helpful. Think about whether or not you are damaging the world more than you are helping it. And it's okay to sit with those feelings. It's okay to feel ashamed of that. You should feel guilty and ashamed, but you can't sit in that forever. So acknowledge it, have your feelings about it, because in the next couple of videos, we are going to talk about how to fix it. Let the shame you feel motivate you to be better. Let it motivate you to improve. Because sitting and wallowing in your shame does very little except for center yourself when you've already done something wrong. So accept your feelings, sit with them for a little while, journal a bit, go outside, hit a tree with a baseball bat. I don't care, however you need to get those feelings out. And then come back for the next video, because that's where we're going to start sorting all of this out. So welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where we talk about how many leftists have not deconstructed their fundamentalist worldview. And we are going to start changing directions here. We've looked at all the ways that maybe we have not unpacked these things, and we've looked at what it can lead to. But I am not a man who likes to point out problems without bringing solutions to the table. And this is not something that is going to happen overnight. This is something you're going to be doing literally for the rest of your life. But doing this work means it is less likely that you are going to pass these things down through generations or project these things onto other members of your community. So where do we even start? Because I know a lot of y'all who've just watched this entire series and you've just had your mind fucked. And I am here to tell you, if you feel shame, if you feel discomfort, if you feel guilt, those feelings are okay and natural, and if you found that you're doing these things, those feelings are good actually. But we aren't just gonna sit there, okay? We aren't just gonna sit there wallowing in our shame. We aren't just gonna sit there thinking about how bad we are, how bad we've been, how embarrassing all of this is. That is not productive. That is why the first thing we are going to talk about here is self-esteem. This starts with you. Because a lot of this stuff is happening because you feel powerless, or because you feel insecure, or because you are afraid of making a mistake. So what you have to do now is find ways to build your confidence. Something I've seen a lot of young queer people do that leads to them lashing out in these really unproductive ways is that they want to be accepted, and they feel like they have to justify their queerness. But you don't, baby. You don't have to justify that shit to anybody. And the reason you feel like you do is because there's a part of you that is insecure and wants to prove to yourself that you are not a mentally ill delusional weirdo, that you're not a degenerate, that you are who you say you are. And you are that. I don't give a shit if people on the internet think I'm not a real man, because I know I'm a real man. If you have a limitation or something you're not good at, you don't have to justify having a limitation or having something you're not good at. You simply have to express that you need more support than you're getting in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Instead of going, woe is me, I have ADHD and I'm bad at organizational tasks, so that means I can't do anything right. What you need to say is, I have ADHD. Organizational tasks are not my strong suit. What can I do to help where I'm not in charge of that thing specifically? If you need physical accommodations, say for example there is a march, and you are someone who uses a cane, and you don't think you're going to be able to do that march. What you can say is, I don't think I'm going to be able to participate in this march. Is there something else I can do to support this movement? Or are there any events that I can come to in the future that are going to be more accessible? And you'll find that using that kind of language is actually really empowering, because you are taking initiative. You are asking to be a part of something. You are acknowledging your limitations, and that's fine. That's good, actually. But instead of saying, well, I can't, what you're saying is, this thing is not for me, but I am still good and useful. I still have something to bring to the table. You don't have to be ashamed of your limitations. That shame is going to make you feel useless. You just have to accept that you're not going to be good at everything. And it is also our job as a community to ensure that people who have limitations are still welcomed and accepted, and that we do provide things for them to do, instead of just scooting them to the sidelines. We are all like cake. We are all in various stages of being baked, And we are not all going to be everyone else's taste. But that doesn't mean we are not a good cake. It's okay. You are good. Maybe you have a little more baking to do. Maybe your icing got messed up a little bit. Maybe you're a flavor of cake that not everyone has a taste for. But that doesn't mean you're not still cake. God, this metaphor is stupid. I'm ending this now. We're gonna go on to the next video. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where we talk about how many leftists have not deconstructed their fundamentalist worldview. And we are in the how to fix things part of the series. We've looked at all the stuff, now we're coming up with solutions, right? And the next thing we're going to talk about is nuance and discernment. There are going to be certain situations where there is conflict, where two people have competing needs, where not everybody in a situation is going to be happy, or where you may have to sacrifice something. And that is going to take a certain level of discernment. I've noticed a lot of situations where people will bring up the worst case scenario in order to justify doing nothing. I'll be like, bake your neighbor a pie. And someone will be like, what if my neighbor is a Blue Lives Matter supporter with a Trump flag on their porch that makes lamps out of human skin? What then? Should I bake them a pie then? Obviously not! Come on, guys, use your heads! And sometimes your discernment is going to be wrong. Sometimes you're gonna make the incorrect choice. Sometimes the choice you make is going to have consequences. Sometimes you're gonna trust someone who shouldn't have been trusted, or exclude someone who shouldn't have been excluded. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Try to have nuance. Try to have discernment. Ask other people what they think you should do. It's okay to ask for advice, especially with complicated situations. You don't have to do this all on your own. And remember, not everyone's out to get you. But sometimes people will end up being unkind. And we talked about self-esteem in the last video. You cannot let that break you. You have to just kind of dust off your sandals. And this is a learning process. Over time, you'll learn what is safe, what is unsafe, what risk you should or should not take. But that takes practice. You're gonna do great. You just have to fuck it up a whole bunch of times until you get it right. But if you like these videos, you like what I do, all the ways to donate are over here. This is going to be my last video for today. We're gonna pick this series back up tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for everything you do. I hope you have a wonderful day and God bless. Hello and welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a video series where we work through ways that leftists still need to deconstruct their fundamentalist upbringing. And we are at the how to fix things part of the series. So the next thing I want to talk about is honesty. And honesty is far more difficult than it sounds. Because truth often means uncomfortable truths. It means looking at ourselves and others, and that can sometimes be really uncomfortable. Sometimes it means looking at someone you may have idolized and realizing they are human and capable of making mistakes. Sometimes it's looking at a group of people that you thought were entirely bad and realizing they are not a monolith. And sometimes it's looking at yourself, looking at your own flaws and taking accountability, and looking at your own strengths and giving yourself praise. And sometimes the second one can be harder than the first. Truth means looking at situations where there's violence and understanding that there shouldn't have been violence. And sometimes it's realizing that violence may be the only option. And all of that is really hard work. But what we also have to do, which I've tried to do with this series, is look at our group as a whole, its strengths and its weaknesses. I got a couple comments that were like, this whole series just plays into all the stereotypes that Republicans have of us. We shouldn't even be talking about this stuff. This stuff isn't even happening. It's just all made up. And I remember when I was growing up, and my mother used to be like, you need to stop talking about the things that are happening in this house. Those things, they aren't even really happening. What are the neighbors going to say about us? What are you making other people think about us? But here's the thing. The truth will set you free. And I think for a really long time now, we have been gaslighting ourselves into thinking these things aren't problems. Because they are things that the right wing have used as talking points. So acknowledging these things exist within our movement feels like concession. So they've just been allowed to fester here. We've been out here saying cancel culture doesn't exist, like the left didn't bully Lindsay Ellis off the internet. Yeah, it may not exist in the way Republicans say it does, but that doesn't mean we don't still have a problem. And it's easier to live in denial than to admit that we may have been fucking up. But the thing is, if we aren't honest with ourselves, we're just gonna keep fucking up. We're just gonna keep doing this really unproductive shit. And that is precisely where the right wing wants us. Continuing to eat ourselves. Continuing to not build coalitions. Continuing to not build community. All because we're too stubborn to just admit that that's what's happening. It's okay to just be honest with ourselves. We just gotta move forward. Look back at this era and cringe. If you're not cringing at who you used to be, then that means you're not learning anything. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where we discuss how many leftists have brought their fundamentalism into leftist spaces. And we are at the how to fix it part of this series. So what I'd like to talk about in this video is discipline. Now, a lot of y'all just had a knee-jerk reaction because you associate discipline with punishment. And I am not talking about punishment. When I talk about discipline, I'm talking about improvement. A dedication to improvement. To do a little better each day. Discipline can be anything from sitting in quiet contemplation for a little while each day, to making sure that your body is clean, making sure you're healthy, that you exercise, that you eat well, ensuring that you aren't just giving in to instant gratification. It's not a bad thing to be more disciplined, to be more in control of the self. Because when we have this control of ourself, when we have this discipline, then we feel more in control of our lives, and that builds confidence. And part of this, too, is when you fail, you do have to get back up again. You can't just make a mistake and be like, oh, it's hopeless. I'm never going to get any better. This is something that's just never going to happen to me. I can never do it. Because here's the thing. Even if you didn't completely accomplish what you wanted to, even if you never do, you're still probably better off than you were before. You are going to fail at being disciplined sometimes. You are going to fall into bad habits. And then you get back on the horse. But human beings need to feel like we've accomplished something. We like our wins. So let yourself have wins. Let yourself feel accomplished. You're gonna feel like you have way more control over your life. And then when you do fuck up, you do fail, you will have built up the confidence that that stuff's not gonna bother you as much anymore. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a video series where we talk about the ways that leftists may not have unpacked their fundamentalism. And we are at the how to fix it part of the series. So the next thing I want to talk about is listening. And listening is one of those things that leftists say we're going to do, and then we don't do it. And I get it, guys. I really do. A lot of y'all are really young. And this is your prime era to be an absolute idiot and think you know everything. Do you know how dumb I was when I was like 20 years old at Occupy Wall Street? I was an idiot. I had no idea what I was doing. But because I was in that real life environment, doing like boots on the ground activism, my idiocy had consequences. If I didn't listen, things happened because of that. And a lot of y'all are very online, and online consequences are wackadoo. But I want you all to take advantage of the fact that you have a lot of people you can listen to and grow from. And don't just listen to people who share your worldview. This especially goes for young queer people. Please, please, please. There are queer people on this app who are older. Older than me even, I know, shocking. As ancient as I am. Please listen to their experiences. Learn from mistakes that queer people older than you have made, that activists older than you have made. That will prevent you guys from fucking up a whole lot. And y'all don't like fucking up. We've established this. A lot of the stuff that I've mentioned in this video, these were mistakes I've made. This was dumb shit I've done. And over the years, I've seen how unhelpful it's been. Now, that doesn't mean that your elders will always have the best advice. Sometimes we need to listen to you guys too. It's a give and take. Listen to our experiences, learn from those, and us older people need to know when it's time to pass the torch. And yes, I know I'm only 32, but to a lot of y'all, that is ancient. And I've also lived like 50 lives at this point, okay? I'm very tired. But this also means listening to people who have had completely different life experiences than you have and trying to understand where they are coming from, why they are making the decisions they're making, what led them to the place they are at, and having compassion. Because most working class people, right? Most working class people, you can find some sort of common ground with. Now, there's gonna be wackadoos, and you're gonna have to discern whether or not someone is actually someone you can work with. But most people are good. Really and truly, I do believe that most people are good. And most people have a perspective worth listening to. And you can decide after you've listened whether or not you agree. You can even ask other people if what that person is saying sounds okay or is completely bonkers. Because even the best of us have shit takes sometimes. And sometimes we need to be told that what we're saying is stupid. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where we talk about how many leftists still need to deconstruct their fundamentalist upbringing. And we are in the how to fix it part of the series, which I've noticed is getting a lot less views. I keep giving y'all solutions, and none of y'all ever listen to them. And then I get comments that are like, well, you just want to complain about the problem, but you don't want to offer up any solutions. The fact that some of y'all say that with your whole chest, when I have made several series. In fact, this video is actually going to be about the importance of bringing forth solutions. So there's this lesser known story in the Bible, right? It's in Numbers, and it's the rebellion of Korah. So what's the deal with Korah? So Korah starts to notice, rightfully so, that Moses is getting too old to lead them. So he decides he's going to have a rebellion against Moses. And he ends up getting punished by God. His whole army essentially lights themselves on fire, burning incense, and Korah himself is swallowed up by the earth. Now, if you ask a fundamentalist what the lesson to take from this story is, they will probably say, oh, well, Korah was being punished for rebelling against authority. You should always listen to authority. But no, I don't think that's the lesson here. No, I think Korah was punished for not having any solutions. He was there ready to stage a coup, to have his little revolution, and he was completely unprepared. And I find it very interesting that his army essentially burnt itself up. If you guys come to the table without any solutions, all you're going to do is burn yourselves up. You're going to infight, you're going to get caught up on little teeny tiny details. Because nobody's actually proposing a plan with steps. Because Korah said what he thought should happen. He thought he should be in power. This man was primed with nothing but his own ego. This is why I have been on y'all for so long about building community, doing mutual aid. Because no matter what plan y'all decide to go with, having strong communities that trust one another and that can provide for one another, that shit is important. It also means that you can collectivize and come up with solutions together, and you'll have that manpower behind you. So when situations arise, you can quickly mobilize. Having solutions, having a plan is important. Otherwise, you're just going to burn yourself up or get swallowed by the earth. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where we talk about how many leftists still need to deconstruct their fundamentalist upbringing. And we are in the how to fix things part of the series, right? And I want to let you guys know, you have a secret weapon. You have something that the right wing will never, ever have. Something that is diametrically opposed to their entire worldview. And that is creativity. Right-wingers are not creative people. Some of them want to be. Some of them try to be. But they're not. They lack imagination. That's why they always have to fall back on a mythic past. That's why they're always trying to defund the arts. That's why you only see washed up celebrities catering to them when their careers and creative abilities are already run dry. And that's why so many of their pundits are failed writers and actors. And it's why right-wing media is so fucking bad. Artists and creatives tend to be more left-wing, because we are the only people capable of imagining a better future. Now, do you get the occasional right-winger who actually has creative ability? Yeah. But they are fairly rare. A great deal of their ideology is built around strength, brute strength. Their aesthetic is always weirdly homoerotic masculinity. You'll have the entirety of the creative community at your disposal. Pretty much all the writers, painters, sculptors, musicians, filmmakers, actors, drag queens, performance artists, fashion designers, makeup artists, hairstylists. Use your creativity to really speak truth to power. I think a lot of us as artists have gotten a bit caught in the rat race, where a lot of us don't make art unless we feel like we can make profit off of that art. And look, guys, I love drawings of cute frogs as much as the next guy, but we can do better than this. Right now, we are all feeling a collective scream, and I am not seeing art that encapsulates that. And I'm seeing some interesting themes that can be worked with. There's a reason that the frog and mushroom art is so popular. It's because I think we all have a unconscious desire to live a simple life outside of capitalism where our needs are met. I think there's a reason that cottagecore is becoming so popular. Why we're all sitting around watching foraging content and baking sourdough bread. Having this creativity also means we can come up with creative solutions. We can imagine a better world. We can imagine ways to get out of this mess. That is our secret weapon. We have to start utilizing it more. No! Guys, please! Alright, so apparently we need to segue off for a second. Please, for the love of God, do not use the points that I am bringing up in these videos to bully and harass other people. Here's the thing, we're pointing out a problem, right? And this series has been fairly well received. So I'm thinking that it's a problem a lot of us have realized is a problem. The fuck is going on with that dog? That dog is always barking at me for no damn reason. It's so mad. Anyway, I got off topic. So we've recognized a problem, right? And now we're at the point of the series where we're figuring out solutions, right? What we are not going to do is use the rhetoric in these videos to bully people who may be engaging in this behavior. Like, okay, we've looked at the problem. We've addressed the problem. We've admitted there's a problem. So we can't use the problem as an excuse to keep perpetuating the problem. Oh, my Lord. So what do we do if we come into contact with someone who is doing this? Because we don't just want to fall back into the cycle, right? So here's a couple things we can do. Number one, we can simply ignore them. Let them burn out. Let them blow off steam. Don't give them any attention. Don't fuel their martyr complex. Or we can just simply say, that hurt my feelings. You have accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. What now? Did this actually make you feel better? We have to remember, a lot of these people are like really, really young. A lot of them are like 20 years old, and they think they know everything. Because everybody thinks they know everything when they're 20 years old. They're mad and they're frustrated and the world is garbage. And they are trying desperately to maintain some sort of control over that situation. When I say we have to have more grace, I mean it. Grace is what's going to get us through this. It's easy to just get mad when you see somebody who you think is doing something counterproductive. I know, because I'm also mad about this. And it's okay to point out that it's a problem. But like I said, a lot of these people who are doing this are really, really young. Or they're people who are really, really hurt. So even though they are really bad about showing people grace, that doesn't mean we don't still have to show grace to them. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, a series where we start to break down how many leftists haven't unpacked their fundamentalist upbringing. And we are in the how to fix things part of the series. And in this part of the series, I really do want to talk about ways that the left often does things better than the right. Because I think if we start looking at these things, we can realize and utilize the tools we have in our toolbox. And one of those things is beauty. The right wing and fundamentalists have a very, very narrow view of what is beautiful, as well as what is natural. The left tends to have a much broader view of that. Fundamentalists, for the most part, really only find beauty in, like, statues from Rome and, like, 16-year-old blonde girls. And that's not great. And, like, I genuinely do think that that's why a lot of their spirituality is so shallow. Everything is very beige, it's very sanitized. Sad beige toys for sad beige fundamentalists. But I think we all crave what I would call a connection to God. Now, before you all freak out, what I mean by that is just like a connection to the natural world, right? And that's something that a lot of us have lost because of industrialization. Now, I am by no means an anarcho-primitivist, okay? I take testosterone. I need Lamictal or I will have mood swings and seizures. But I think we genuinely do want our hands in the dirt. I think we want to create. And because so much of the left has been focused lately around abolition and destruction, I think we've kind of lost our sense of beauty. Because there can be beauty in destruction. Because destruction leaves opportunity for creation. But we've forgotten the creation part. Beauty also allows us to see beauty in each other. I think we need to get rid of the concept of cringe. Because cringe, more often than not, just feels like enthusiasm. And I feel like we need enthusiasm. I feel like we need to go into each day with the enthusiasm of Guy Fieri eating a pulled pork sandwich. And honest to God, touching grass helps us appreciate beauty. Like, here, come with me. We're gonna go do something together. It is actually a beautiful day. All right, come with me. Here's what we're gonna do, okay? We are going to lay down on the grass. And look at this already. Look at this flower. Isn't that a pretty flower? And we're just going to enjoy this. We're going to enjoy the sunshine and enjoy the beauty. And we're going to see what we notice a little bit, right? Oh man, look, that bush is in bloom. I didn't even notice that one before. And look at that. The little violets are starting to come up. We got some wild onions here. I can use those for cooking. Oh man, look at the neighbor's daffodils. There's a bird right there. Do you see him, that robin? There's a closer look at those daffodils. Those are gorgeous. And see, that's why we got to touch grass, okay? Because touching grass is a reminder that there are things in this world worth fighting for. We're fighting for the ability to lay in the grass and watch the flowers grow. At the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. We're here to be a part of all of this, you know? And I think we naturally want to be productive in some way or another. I think that helps us feel better. But it's the beauty that reminds us what we're being productive for. And if we're not being productive in ways that help us do this more often, that don't protect all of this, that don't help you, as I would put it, connect with God, what is the point? That's your homework today. Go sit outside. Take your shoes off. Put your feet in the dirt. I will not be showing you my feet. I don't do that for free. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. And we're just gonna continue on with this series while sitting in the grass. Because it's a nice day. And I like being in the grass. It's actually like perfect weather today. Like there's a really nice breeze, but there's also sunshine. There is not a cloud in the sky. It's good stuff. And I had talked about how we're in the how to fix things part of this series. And I wanted to talk about tools that leftists actually do have, that things that we are really good at, but maybe we've lost or forgotten along the way. So what I want to talk about in this part is curiosity. Because part of the reason that all the stuff I've talked about in this series is so counterproductive is because it does not allow room for curiosity. It does not allow space for questions and open dialogue and communication. Not debate. This is not the free marketplace of ideas, okay? I'm talking about real, genuine, healthy communication where we discuss things with one another to try to come to a conclusion, not to try to one-up each other. And communication and curiosity are such valuable resources. I had talked about risk aversion earlier in this series, and risk aversion destroys curiosity. Like, how can you be curious if you're too afraid of making a mistake? Sometimes you just gotta dive into stuff, you know? Curiosity is part of the natural scientific process. And anybody who's a scientist knows that science often involves fucking it up. Making hypotheses that turn out to be completely untrue, gathering data that is completely contradictory to what you thought the result would be. But it's our curiosity that drives us. It gives us imagination. As Miss Frizzle said, take chances, make mistakes, get messy. It's the only way we're ever going to get anything done. And so we have to be okay with mistakes. We have to be okay with chances, and we have to be okay with getting messy. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. If you've made it this far, you probably know what this series is about by now. But we are in the how to fix things part of the series, right? And in this video, we are going to be using a lot of fruit metaphors, okay? So I'm gonna need you to stay with me. I promise all of this is gonna make sense at the end. So a few years ago, I ended up in a psych ward. Your boy was not doing well. And while I was in the psych ward, you know, they bring in your food on a big tray. And I opened up the tray, and I realized that on this tray was fresh fruit. And I just started eating this fresh fruit. And I realized it had been months since I had eaten any fresh fruit. Which probably had something to do with the depression I was in. My body was literally not getting the nutrients it needed. And oh man, I remember that fruit despite it just being like hospital food, was some of the best fruit I had ever eaten in my whole life. And I was so grateful. And now I'm in a financial situation where I don't have a whole lot of money, but I do make enough to regularly buy fresh fruit. So here is my bowl of fresh fruit. Now, as you can see, this bowl has a little chip in it. Now, I have a choice, right? I can choose to have gratitude for the fact that I have fresh fruit, or I can choose to be upset that my bowl is chipped. So in this video, we're going to talk about gratitude. And oh boy, is that something that's difficult for people on the left to talk about. Because it's so often used against us, right? Every time we bring up a problem in the world, there's someone to be like, you ungrateful kids. All you do is complain about stuff. And it's really frustrating, right? Because we're trying to make the world a better place. Gratitude has been used as such a weapon that it's almost difficult for us to be thankful for the things we have. Our feelings about the world aren't being acknowledged, so they just kind of fester there, right? But gratitude is actually really useful because gratitude is how we collectivize. I have fruit. I am very lucky to have this fruit. There are times in my life where I did not have fruit. There are other people in this world who do not have fruit. And because I am grateful for this fruit, I now see this fruit as something everyone should have access to. Now, as I said, my bowl is chipped. And there might be some of you out there who are like, I don't have a chipped bowl. I am grateful for my intact bowls. And I would like for everyone to have bowls that they can eat their food out of. Gratitude allows us to understand our part in the collective. It allows us to see realistically how we are better off and worse off than other people. And because we like the things we have, we can start looking at ways to ensure that other people have those things. It also allows you to see how you have things you can give to other people so that you can share resources. But gratitude also serves another purpose. And because we're on our fruit metaphors, we're going to talk about this queen. This is Madame Blueberry. Reverend Pop Pop has come to teach the kids about Madame Blueberry. So what's the deal with Madame Blueberry? So Madame Blueberry is a blueberry who lives in a treehouse, and she's really sad all the time. Just deeply depressed. And all day she thinks about all the things she doesn't have. And these guys show up to her door and they're like, we're opening a new mega mall and it's going to be full of all the things you want. And so she goes there and she goes shopping and she realizes that none of that stuff actually made her feel better, right? Now, a bunch of you are about to sit there in my comment section and be like, Oliver, what we want is healthcare. Stay with me, okay? Stay with me. Because this is what I'm trying to get at, okay? I need to remind you that the powers that be rely on your discontent to sell you shit. And none of us are immune to that. But gratitude helps us be less susceptible to it. Now here's where I bring it all together, right? Here's where I bring it all in. Having gratitude shows you your place in the collective. It allows you to see what you have that other people need. And it makes you less susceptible to marketing. And what you've done is you've tricked your brain now. You've gone from I want, I deserve, to we want, we deserve, we need. And if you find you don't have fresh fruit, and your neighbor doesn't have fresh fruit, and their neighbor doesn't have fresh fruit, then it's time to get together and start finding a way to get y'all fresh fruit. If you realize that your coworker is making less than you, then it's time to start fighting for your coworker. It lets you see a fuller picture of what you have, what you need, and what others have and what others need, and what everybody needs collectively. And that is how you make a movement based in love. Because then you're not just doing things because you want fresh fruit. You're doing things because we all need fresh fruit. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. We are in the How to Fix Things part of the series. And in this video, I want to talk about hope. And the reason I wanted to do a video on this in particular today is because I'm not feeling a lot of hope today. And I wanted to make this today to let you guys know that feeling hope isn't going to be a feeling you have all the time. It's just a feeling you have to have more often than not. Today, I am going to sit here with this Mothman plushie, and I'm going to be sad. But that doesn't mean I have to be sad tomorrow. That doesn't mean that everything is always going to be bad. We just have to keep working at it, day after day. Sometimes keeping hope means letting yourself sit and feel the bad feeling for a little while. And today I'm feeling sad, and I'm feeling hopeless, and I'm feeling reactionary. I want to yell and scream and stomp my feet, and it's okay to have that feeling. But hope
Hope is what helps you aim that feeling. Hope is what helps you get through that feeling. Hope is not just not looking at the bad stuff. It's not toxic positivity. Hope can only exist in the darkness. It's acknowledging the darkness and still believing there's a way out.
Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. If you've been here a while, you know what this series is about. If not, feel free to check out this playlist. It is much longer than I expected, but a lot of y'all have asked me to put this into a YouTube video, so I will be doing that. It might be a while, because this series is definitely over 2 hours of content by now, but I am going to try to do that for you guys. And we are in the trying to fix things part of the series, right? We've pointed out the problem, now we're talking solutions. And the next thing we're going to talk about is bravery. Because some of y'all need to get a little more brave. And I am going to try to say this stuff with love. I am going to try to be as kind as I can. But we talked about risk aversion earlier in this series. And some of y'all are so risk averse and so concerned with safety that it has frankly made you a bit selfish. Now, I am not saying you can never treat yourself, or that you should burn yourself out beyond belief, or that every second of your life should be dedicated to helping others. But I do think it is virtuous to prioritize the well-being of other people. And there gets to be a point where if you are constantly prioritizing your own comfort, your own safety, your own desire for security, it does become cowardice. Like, the definition of cowardice. And it's very, very frustrating. Especially for me to see this from other queer people, because there have been so many queer people, so many over the course of history, who have fought for your right to live openly, to fall in love with who you like, to dress how you like, and I am old enough to remember when that was still very much a fight. I have friends that are just a few years older than me, who lost a great deal of their friends to HIV and AIDS, and who fought for those people. Hell, gay marriage wasn't even legalized until 2 years after I was at OWS, at least not nationwide, and none of those rights were won by queer people being unwilling to take risk. There was so much risk taken. And if you continue on this path, the queer people who come after you are going to remember you as the generation who hid away in their houses and did nothing, because they wanted to be safe and comfortable. Interacting with other human beings is always going to come with some level of risk. But I will tell you this. I have a trans ministry in a red state. We regularly go out and feed those less fortunate than us. Like, we have a wagon full of sack lunches that we just drag down the street. And not all of our group passes. We are noticeably queer. We carry a trans flag a lot of the time, actually, because we think it's important for people to see trans people out in their community because it helps to humanize us. And we have never, not once, gotten shit. I canvassed for the Sidney McElroy campaign. That meant going door to door to door, people's houses, with political pamphlets for a Democratic candidate. Every single person on that staff was black, brown, or queer. And there were only a few times we encountered hostility in the literal months we were canvassing. And even then, nobody actually got hurt. We got a little freaked out, but no one got hurt. And like I said, that's going to people's doors, people's houses, and actively annoying them in the middle of the day. And that canvassing wasn't just in town. We were out in the hollers. The world can be scary, but I assure you it is less frightening than you think it is. And when you are constantly prioritizing your own comfort and safety, what you are doing is putting all the responsibility on the backs of people who have no choice but to fight. And that is selfish, that is cowardly. It really is, and I think y'all need to spend some time thinking about that. So when I make these videos where I'm like, bake your neighbor a pie, go out and volunteer at a local food pantry, this isn't just a challenge to build community, this is a challenge to build your own personal courage. I'm not asking y'all to go out and set fire to a police car, okay? I am simply asking you to step outside your comfort zone. And there are 100 ways to do that. And to those of you who have challenged yourself to do things like that, who've told me about the things you've done in my comment section, I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you for going out, for challenging yourself, for building community. Keep up the good work. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. If you've been here a while, you know what the series is about. But we are in the how to fix things part of this series, right? If we want to bring up problems, we have to bring up solutions. And I have a feeling the tone is going to be a bit different on this one. It's going to be a little harsher, and I do apologize for that. But I do feel the need to speak with a bit of candor on this one. So in this video, we're going to be talking about diplomacy. Now, I think the reason a lot of people on the left have a terrible view of diplomacy is because the Democrats are also bad at it. What the Democrats do isn't diplomacy, it's just concession. Talk about how we need all these dinosaurs out of office, right? But who are we replacing them with? Who? Because none of y'all are running for office, and very, very few of you understand diplomacy. And that is going to be a massive problem moving forward. Diplomacy is not debate. A lot of y'all learned how to debate, but you do not know how to be a diplomat. Because debate means you are trying to argue your point of view and get the other person to agree with it. Diplomacy is coming together in an attempt to broker an agreement. There's actually a joke in Star Trek Lower Decks that I love, because they're playing a game called Diplomat, and they're talking about how if at the end of the game nobody's happy, you know you've done a good job. Part of the reason we have a hard time explaining our ideas is because we talk a lot of time about abolition, how to destroy things, how to tear things down, but we don't talk a whole lot about building things, and tangible ways to do that. And like, honest to God, guys, realistically, if you want peace, you have to learn diplomacy. And diplomacy, a great deal of the time, is going to involve eating shit. And y'all don't want to do that. Y'all don't want to sit there and eat shit, because it fucking sucks. But over time, you learn when to hold them and when to fold them. Right now, in my own community, I am trying to put together an interfaith festival. A festival where we all come together with the hope of peace to learn and grow from one another, to try to come to a greater understanding of each other's perspective. And I am doing this in an incredibly religiously tumultuous time. I am a transgender minister trying to convince Jewish people, Muslim people, Christians, pagans, Hindus, and Buddhists to all do a thing together. That requires diplomacy. And am I scared and overwhelmed? Yes, of course I am. But if we can't broker any sort of diplomacy in our own communities, how can we possibly expect to do it anywhere else? How are y'all gonna take the reins? How are y'all gonna become representatives for your community if you do not learn this skill? And to tie it into this series, a lot of y'all grew up evangelical. You grew up fundamentalist. You learned how to yell Bible verses at people, and that was about it. Because in your mind, you were right. Your denomination was the only one getting to heaven. Everyone else was sinful and wrong. There is no diplomacy in that situation. There is only debate. So a lot of y'all never learned how to come to the table. And I get comments all the time that are like, but if we don't exclude people for every little tiny offense, or yell at them to be on our side, how will we know what the right thing to do is? How long do I have to put up with it? And here's the thing, there's not an answer. There's not an answer at all. And you're gonna fuck it up a lot. You're gonna fuck up diplomacy a great deal before you get it right. You're going to fuck up conflict mediation a great deal before you get it right. But here's the thing, if y'all continue on like you are, the group of people that you're going to be able to work with is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you simply will not have the numbers. You will become more and more isolated. And then when big problems arise, no one will be able to get on the same page to fix them. And like the fact that y'all are asking me, like, but what if somebody does a bad thing in my group? What do I do then? I don't know what the bad thing is. Like, okay, if someone's being like a misogynist in your group, right? Okay, what did they do? Are they roofying women? Or did they tell a tasteless joke? Because if they told a tasteless joke, they need talked to about it. Namely in private. Because people are far more likely to change their opinions if they're not embarrassed. If someone is roofying women, though, obviously a talking to is not gonna cut it. Y'all have been treating all sin as equal for so long. You no longer know how to do diplomacy. And there are ways to learn this skill. You can watch Star Trek and get some, like, basic diplomacy skills. Like, really, really basic. I'm sure there are online classes, things you can learn on Skillshare or YouTube. But a lot of it is just going to be going out into your community and learning how. And facing failure, facing rejection, being brave. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. We are in the how to fix things part of this series, and in this video I want to talk about joy. And not just joy, visible joy. Trans Day of Visibility is coming up, And so I've been thinking a lot about the importance of visible joy. Because let's be honest with ourselves here. A lot of the left comes off as miserable fucks. I mean, I'm just thinking about my own community here. And I'm like, trans people talk all the time about how, we're happy. Our transition has made us so happy. But then on social media, we're like, go, I know. And people aren't gonna believe us. They're not gonna believe us. And I understand, it's obviously not the transition that's made us unhappy. It's the world. But visible trans joy is important. There's a reason that the right wing fucking hates Dylan Mulvaney as much as they do. Why they go after her in particular. And it's because she's cheerful. And her cheerfulness is a threat. Because she is proof of trans joy. And they will do anything they can to try to undermine that. One of the greatest protests that any marginalized person can participate in is to simply be and be happy in places we are told we are not allowed to be. That's why they got so pissed off about drag queen story time too. That's why they get so pissed off about representation in media. Because we are where we don't belong. It's why I love that Flamey Grant and Semler went to the Dove Awards. Because they had just as much of a right to be there as anyone else. And that took some courage. It takes courage to be where you're not supposed to be. Where society says you don't belong. To be happy when society says you should be sad. It takes a massive amount of strength. But that joy, that strength, that love, that is a danger to the people who do not want to see us. So live joyfully. Find a reason every single day to get up, to like yourself, and to love other people. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction, and we are in the Trying to Fix Things part of the series. And in this video, we're going to talk about humbleness. And humbleness is a good thing. It allows us to see ourselves as equal to others, it allows us to see our privileges, and it can actually, if practiced correctly, lead to better self-esteem. Because when you're genuinely humble, it kind of sorts out your place in the universe, right? And so if you have any sort of anxieties that people may be watching you or talking about you, being humble can help you realize most people aren't thinking about you. You are not that much the center of attention. It also, like I said, helps us realize our privileges. But instead of thinking about our privileges in this sort of bizarre masochistic way that leads to shame and paralysis, like I said, it simply sorts out your place in the world. You can say, okay, I have these privileges in society, but I want to reach down. I want to lift other people up. I want to stand in solidarity with other people. And the best thing humbleness gives you is the ability to see that you do not know everything. You don't always know what's best for other people. You don't always know the best way to fix the world. You are not always right. You are not smarter than other people. You are not better than other people. You are not more righteous than other people. You are a flawed individual, and so is everyone else. Humbleness can help you come to terms with not being perfect. Because when you're trying to be perfect, when you're trying not to make any mistakes ever, when you refuse to humble yourself and believe that you are capable of making those mistakes, then you will never take accountability for them. You will never see the log in your own eye. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. We are in the Trying to Fix Things part of this series, and in this video I want to talk about generosity. And I want to make a couple of points about generosity. Number one, generosity is the opposite of envy. And I really would like some of you to take a long look inside of yourselves and see how much of what you are posting or how you interact with other people is based around envy. And I'm going to use my dad as examples for both of these points that I'm trying to make. So when I was growing up, my dad was in the closet, and he treated me incredibly poorly because what he really wanted was to come out of the closet. And he was always coming up with new ways, new Bible verses, new reasons why I should not be as open as I was, because he was too ashamed to do what I was doing. And I think a lot of y'all, whether you like to admit it or not, do operate in a similar fashion. I think some of y'all are ashamed of the fact that you are too scared to do stuff. I think some of y'all are mad that you are unhappy. And so when you see people who are doing things you are too scared to do, or experiencing joy that you don't find in yourselves, you want to tear that person down. I have seen posts where people are sharing their transition joy, and people are angry about it because they don't have the money to transition or the ability to do so. And that is not helpful. It's not. We should be generously reveling in the joy of our trans siblings. And yes, it can be frustrating to not have these things, but that is not the fault of the person who has those things. I saw a lot of y'all do the same thing with Jory and that necklace, and it's not right. Y'all are just trying to morally justify being envious and mean-spirited. The second point I want to make about generosity is that you do have to give back to the collective. Something, anything, even if it's small. Some of you want to take from the collective. You want to take the rights that were won for you. You want to enjoy the privileges you have, that were fought for by other marginalized people. But you want to stay in your hidey hole, and you don't want to give anything back. You don't want to give anything to the future generations. You don't want to plant those seeds for trees that you're not going to sit under. And that is the same thing the boomers did. And that is why they are so despised now. Now that my dad is out of the closet, he has no interest in getting politically involved. He's happy. He's where he wants to be. He lives comfortably in the rights that everybody else fought for. He has his little husband, his little house. He gets to be a gay amongst the straights, and he doesn't want to give back to the collective. And if you notice, these two things feed into each other, right? People with privilege don't feed into the collective so that everyone can get what they need, and then the people who don't have what they need respond in envy. This is the result of years and years and years of people kicking the ladder as soon as they get to the top, and the people who were left behind feeling understandably frustrated about that, but instead of realizing these are due to systems of power, just start getting mad at other queer people when they simply achieve their goals. And this goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And what needs to happen is generosity. Our lack of generosity has led to a crabs in a bucket effect, where anytime a queer person achieves success, we pick at any flaw they may have until we've destroyed them. But then when some queer people achieve success, they use that as an excuse to throw everyone else under the bus. I'm looking at you, Blair White. I'm looking at you, Buck Angel. This has to end, because we're not going to get anywhere if it continues. Welcome back to Leftist Deconstruction. I haven't made one of these videos in a second, and I want to make about 3 more, and then I want to wrap this up, because I actually do want to take this whole series and make it into a YouTube video that's going to be like 2.5 hours long. And we are in the solutions part of this series, and the next thing I want to talk about is empathy. I have seen a concerning lack of empathy from a lot of leftist activists. This very punitive sense of justice, this inability to see other people as your fellow man. And I really think we need to step away from that. Actually, you know what? I think I can fit all of these into one video, and I'll just wrap this series right up. The next thing I want to talk about is education. Education is a very, very important part of activism, and we have to make sure we are getting our information correct, that we aren't just spreading around misinformation. And if you are an activist, it is your job to educate people. You have taken up that cross. If you're just like a random marginalized person, no, it's not your job to educate other people. But if you are someone who is actively engaging in activism, it absolutely is your job. And that means engaging with people in a multitude of different ways. You can make educational videos on TikTok, you can make educational videos on YouTube, but you also need to be making pamphlets and flyers. You need to be having speaking events. In some places, you can write to the opinion column of newspapers. And the last thing is action. There has to be tangible action, and there needs to be far more focus on what actually is tangible action. Because, like, babies, your utopian pipe dream is valid, okay? But we have to figure out what steps need to be taken in order for us to get to the place we want to be. And y'all need to go out and interact with people. Y'all need to go out and, like, actually shake the hands of other human beings. I am begging y'all, for the experience alone, go out and canvass this year. Really and truly, a lot of y'all need to go out and canvass. Y'all need to knock on people's doors. And if you don't want to canvass, go volunteer at a soup kitchen. Really and truly, y'all, you need to get out into the world. You need to learn how to navigate reality. And you need to build your confidence. And the only way to do that is through real, tangible action. Things you can see, cause and effect. Actual interactions with human beings that you have to look in the eyes. But I am going to go ahead and wrap up this series, and I'm going to start writing the YouTube video of this. And at the end of this, I'm going to combine this series with the How to Do an Activism series. That way it's kind of split into 3 parts. how we need to deconstruct, values we need to instill upon ourselves and encourage within each other, and tangible ways to make a difference in the world. Because we can do better than what we're doing now. A better way is possible. Alright, so I wanted to start doing some follow-ups on my leftist deconstruction series. And I want to discuss this sort of like black and white thinking, this all sin is equal mentality, and start trying to kind of work through that. And I think one of the first things we need to do is create a distinction between what is acceptable and what is honorable. Creating a spectrum between, okay, what will I give grace to? And what is the goal I believe we should work towards? And so I've kind of created a tier system. Now, at the top here is honorable, and it's okay to get a little utopian with this one. This can be somewhat unreasonable. This is how you'd expect Jesus to treat this situation. And if individual people manage to live up to this, hell yeah, that's awesome. But we do have to accept that where we are right now, they may not. It is the goal we are working towards. Respectable. Respectable is a more realistic goal. It takes into account where people are at and offers grace. This is where your like allies and comrades are, right? Acceptable. This is kind of your bare minimum. It's like, okay, you got the spirit, you're doing your best, you want to know more, but you are where you are, and that's okay. Let's learn together. Next is understandable. And understandable is like, okay, I get where you're coming from. I can have empathy and compassion for this position, but you've really drawn the wrong conclusions here, and I think you and I need to have a talk. Dishonorable is, okay, you're being a dick, and you really, really need to work on this. And I may or may not always have the energy to help you with that. And unacceptable is like, this should either be considered a crime, or should at least have significant social consequences. This is active antisocial behavior. You are engaging in active, deliberate harm. And we need to address this before you hurt yourself or others. And to further break this down, I made one of these on how I think queer people should be treated. Now, these are going to be different for everybody. Nobody is going to have quite the same tier list, but this at least helps your brain decide what the consequences of certain actions should be. Because if somebody's acting honorably, you can be like, man, you really do go above and beyond. And in this fucked up world, I'm really thankful that I have people like you in my life. Whereas if someone's in the acceptable position, you can be like, hey, let's look for ways you can learn more. And if somebody's like in the understandable place, you can be like, hey, I really don't like the things you're doing. We need to have like a discussion about this. And then we as a community should talk about how we want to handle unacceptable behavior. Things we cannot tolerate, things that do cause active harm. But I just realized I went over 3 minutes on this. I'm going to make a part 2. And in that, I'm going to show you where I put my tier list on queer rights. Alright, so this is my follow-up video on addressing your black and white thinking. This is part of my leftist deconstruction series. If you haven't seen part 1, you actually will want to go back and watch that. Just click the comment. But in the last video, I discussed this tier system that I created that has helped me kind of break down where I'm at on certain issues. And you don't have to share this with anybody. This can be entirely private, and everyone's is going to be different. But I do encourage you to do this for yourself, just to kind of check in with yourself, see where you're at, and where your morality is, and where you would like it to be moving forward. Alright, so this is my honorable category, and remember, this is the one that's a little bit utopian. This is the end goal. This is where we want things to be. And I made my tier list on how I would like queer people to be treated, but you can use this for any number of issues in your life, whether they be political or personal. So in my honorable category, I have treating queer people the same way one would treat anyone else, with no microaggressions or miscommunications. Queer culture is understood and respected. Queer people have full religious and political freedom. Gender-affirming healthcare is easily accessible. Now, how would I react if someone personally meets this standard in the crazy fucked up world we live in? Well, we have to realize we're probably only going to get this from other queer people. But how I would react is I would say something like, thank you for being a good friend to me. I'm glad we're in this together. we live in a fucked up world, and I'm really glad we can be there for each other. The next category is respectable. And this is a much more reasonable goal, where we kind of expect people to be because they're humans. This is where the majority of, like, your allies are going to be, your comrades. And for this, I have queer people are treated with respect and dignity. Microaggressions and miscommunications are discussed and corrected without argument or groveling. Pronouns are respected, even if they are at first occasionally forgotten. Queer culture is not necessarily understood, but is respected. Straight and cis people work towards full religious and political freedom for queer people. You probably know people in your life who meet this standard. And how I think we should react to this is forming strong community bonds with these people, working closely with these people, and kindly and respectfully answering their questions. They are obviously on our side, and if they're asking questions, they're genuinely trying to learn. Next is the acceptable category. And this is kind of the bare minimum. You've got the spirit. And having these kinds of people around is good. These are people who are willing to learn, but maybe haven't been around queer people. Or they're older and they're still getting used to things. And here's what I have for acceptable. Queer people are treated with basic dignity and given basic human rights. Microaggressions and miscommunications are not always handled perfectly, but there is a sense that the person has the desire to learn and grow. Person may have difficulty with pronouns, perhaps they're older or have little experience with queer people, but they have a desire to respect people even if they don't really get it. Queer culture is not always understood or respected, but the person at least doesn't want to complicate the lives of queer people more. And I think how we should handle these people is to sit down, have good faith conversations with them, answer their questions, accept that they might not always use the correct terminology when they're asking them or when they're addressing us, but by giving them the space to learn and grow. All right, the next category is understandable. And understandable people are like, okay, I understand, I see where you got to where you are. I can have compassion and empathy for these positions, but I really think you've drawn the wrong conclusion here, or you're maybe centering yourself, and we need to find a way to address this together. Because even if you don't mean for it to be, you're still being hurtful and or annoying. And for understandable, I have parents expressing grief, worry, or disappointment over their child's queer identity, but overall wanting to see their child happy. Microaggressions and miscommunications are handled poorly, with a great deal of annoying groveling and or defensiveness. Queer culture is not understood or respected, and queer spaces are utilized by cis and straight people as if we are purely entertainment for them, instead of them being guests in our spaces. Our rights are not thought about. But I'm going to have to make another part to this, because my therapist is like, are you ready for your appointment? So I told her to give me 5 minutes while I finished up. I'm going to be going through the other parts in the next video. Okay, so this is going to be part 3 of this black and white thinking series. It's part of my Leftist Deconstruction series. If you haven't seen the previous videos, you will want to go back and watch them on this one. You will actually need that context. And I meant to finish this up in the last video, but my therapist was like, it's time for therapy today. And so I had to cut that one short, but I'm going to go ahead and make this follow-up, where we're going to discuss the last 2 tiers here. So the second to last category here is the dishonorable. These are things that are a problem. The people who are doing them may feel they are being well-meaning, but they are still actively causing harm, and it is something that needs to be addressed, because it is stuff that will impact people's lives. It's the kind of like, I'm okay with queer people with an asterisk. Persecution masquerading as love by religious people. Microaggressions and miscommunications are ignored or treated as frivolous. Queer people are gatekept, treated poorly, or tokenized in the workplace and religious spaces. Rights are gatekept to the point where only the most acceptable queer people have access to rights. These are probably going to be people who think they are doing the right thing, who don't necessarily want to see like cruelty towards queer people, but who are still doing things that actively uphold these systems of oppression. Sorry, I had to go around the house because my neighbors just came out, and I don't like being watched while I'm filming. And the last category is unacceptable. Unacceptable behavior is deliberate, it is malicious, it is hateful. These are people who actively want to hurt or marginalize or oppress a group of people. And for unacceptable behavior, I have violence towards queer people, actively creating or promoting anti-queer propaganda, counter-protesting queer events, the defacing or destruction of queer art, literature, or spaces, the use of slurs against queer people, kicking one's queer child out of the house, bans on gender-affirming care, legislation that impacts queer people's ability to move throughout life, discrimination against queer people in the workplace and religious spaces. These are your Yahtzees, your J.K. Rowlings, your Proud Boys. These are the people who have a goal in mind. They want to hurt you. And I think we need to discuss as a community what we are actually going to do about these kinds of people who engage in this sort of antisocial behavior. How do we separate them and keep them from causing harm? What are we realistically going to do? Because we can make, buttons that say smash the fash all we want. But I'm not seeing a terrible amount of fash smashing, so we may want to look into some other methods, and we need to discuss those other methods with the intention of finding solutions that work, not just what will give us personal catharsis.